Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Daniel, and I am a Key Partnerships Manager here at Your Overseas Home. Today, we welcome Henry Kent from Holborn Assets. Henry, can you please introduce yourself and about kind of what Holborn does?
Yeah, I've got some slides that cover that. If you'd like me to jump in.
Yeah, of course, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Yeah, pleasure to be here. My name's Henry Kent. I'm one of the senior financial planners here at Holborn Assets. For anyone who's unaware of Holborn, I'll give an introduction just on the next slide. But for now, um, I'm one of the senior financial advisors at Holborn, based in Portugal. I'm fully qualified and licensed to provide regulated financial advice to clients across the whole of the EU, and that's via my diploma and qualifications under the Central Bank of Ireland, originally from Brighton, before I decided I needed some warmer weather and made the move over here to Europe, Spain previously, and now Portugal with my family in the south. But a quick introduction to Holborn Assets for anyone that hasn't heard any of our webinars or any of my colleagues speak, or even spoken with anyone here. Holborn Assets is a global financial advisory. We specialize in providing cross-border financial advice to clients in over 100 different countries around the world, and that's via our 21 international offices. However, myself and my team, we specialize in Portugal, and that's why I'm here speaking today. As a company, multi-award winning, 4.5-star Trustpilot review, with in excess of 4 billion in assets under management across our 21 international offices. But today we're here focused on Portugal.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Henry. And just to confirm, and just to say thank you for everyone that is currently online. And this is also whether you're watching on demand as well, because this will be available on our YouTube channel after this has been live. Just if during the rest of Henry's presentation, if you did have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen. We do hope to get through as many queries as we can today, but if we do not get round to them all, then please don't worry. Any unanswered questions will also be forwarded to Henry following this webinar. And again, sorry to jump in there, Henry, but please carry on, take it away.
Thank you. Cheers. Today, what I'm going to go through is the essential financial planning for before you make the move to Portugal, because I imagine there's lots of people listening now or on the replay who are considering or in the process. So I just want to go over the key parts that always come up in my first meetings with individuals who are looking to make the move abroad, to protect yourself and save in potential taxes and liability, and then also post-move as well, considerations and planning from that side. Just to let you know, here at Holborn Assets, we can assist most nationalities. So Americans, we've got a US American specialist on the team, and also Brits, Canadians, South Africans. We can provide advice that's tailored to yourself, taking into consideration home country taxations, but also making sure that they're suited for life in Portugal. So the first one is pension and investment planning. This one's important because a lot of our home countries, we have sort of ISAs from a UK perspective, TFSAs from Canada, and other tax efficient vehicles that are suited for life once you're based in your home country. But when you make the move to Portugal, Portugal don't recognise the tax efficiency of these type of structures. And there are, fortunately, alternatives that carry very good tax benefits, but it just may require a restructure for Portuguese compliance, essentially. Also, if you pre-plan on these, typically, and I'm not saying this is sort of blanket advice for everyone, it may be that you're coming to Portugal and plan to return back to the UK, so it may not be best advice to surrender any tax-efficient investments. It's nuanced, as I mentioned. It's best to reach out to me and we can sit down and go through this, but this is just sort of general advice at the moment to consider, because some of these, if they're surrendered or shut down before making the move, there's no capital gains, there's no tax liability, but if it's delayed until you're a Portuguese resident, there could potentially be tax liability there as well. So something to consider. And then the third and final one that's came up a lot this year is, can you, if you're lucky enough and you have a financial advisor, can they continue to work with you? Do they understand Portuguese taxation? And will there be any potential restrictions on your retirement or non-retirement accounts to consider? Here, it's better to be proactive rather than reactive. Have the conversations early. Sit down and speak with me if necessary, if you want to, and we can evaluate and look at what you've got in place, potential liability, and what can be done, if necessary, for a restructure to save you in tax and help there. Second, then, is the big one is what to do with your home. I know this is difficult because there's a sentimental value with having a property and having your home. You're not always, there may be some doubt in your mind about fully committing yourself to making the move and wanting that sort of fallback just in case. But if you do sell before making the move, typically you have your main residence relief. This saves yourselves considerable amounts in tax. If you were to sell that property, again, if you delay till once in Portugal, the capital gains element will be liable for tax in Portugal. And there's certain nuances there, but essentially, if you delay your property sale till when you're a tax resident in Portugal, then there's potentially liability from a Portuguese perspective on that. So timing is very important from investments, pensions, and also potentially selling your home. I'm not going too quick, am I, Daniel, through this? Is that all okay?
No, this is going great. And if anyone did want any clarification, again, this is why the chat function's here. So please feel free to highlight anything that you'd like any more information about in the chat, people watching from home.
Perfect, thank you. The next one is, what makes you a tax resident in Portugal? So it's all well and good talking about planning and post-move, pre-move structuring, but what makes you a tax resident? So the general rule of thumb is 183 days. If you spend over 183 days in a calendar year, that triggers tax residency, but you also have home country statutory tests. So if your main house is there, business interests and other aspects. But for Portugal's perspective, if you spend over 183 days of a calendar year, you'll be considered a tax resident. The majority of people may have to have sort of obtained a visa before moving to Portugal. That also can trigger tax residency when you've changed your address on the IRS website here in Portugal. But the general rule of thumb is 183 days, and then potentially the date that you've made the move. And then fourth and finally is, I know that tax treaties, they can be quite lengthy, but just making sure that your country where you have assets, pensions, investment income or employment income, has a double taxation agreement with Portugal, because that means that you won't be taxed twice, but if there is tax at source, once you declare that, because in Portugal you have to declare your worldwide income and assets, it won't be taxed twice. Portugal will take into consideration any tax liability paid in the source country when declaring that in Portugal. So they're the four main ones. Also, something that came up yesterday that's very important that I haven't included in here, but I do want to mention that not a lot of people know about, is Portugal does have a blacklist country list. And this means that certain sort of what Portugal sees as tax or low tax jurisdictions around the world is taxed higher on capital gains, income, and dividends, which in Portugal is typically 28%. That is 35 if held in a blacklist country. And these aren't necessarily what you would imagine to be sort of tax havens. You've got Jersey, Guernsey, Bermuda, these type of jurisdictions, which not a lot of people know about. So worth mentioning, if you have assets or interests in these locations, usually it's best to restructure and move away to delay the headache and potential tax consequences with life in Portugal. If anyone has any questions on this, I know Daniel keeps reiterating, I'll reiterate it as well. Questions, feel free to put in. But also I'm going to include a QR code at the end where you can book a meeting directly with me, because I know these type of subjects and conversations are quite confidential. It may be better to have a one-on-one. So I'll leave my QR code at the end that will allow you to book in through Calendly into my diary. Now, moving on. Essential advice for when you become a tax resident in Portugal. Rent versus buy. This is a big topic. Obviously, with the majority of visas, you do have to have a proof of accommodation. So it may be that a lot of people do have that sort of renting or property available on a rental contract. But if not, the conversation is always between renting and buying. Renting is great because you have your flexibility and you can do scouting missions, exactly what I've done when I moved to Portugal. It allows you to rent somewhere and get a feel of the area, spend time throughout Portugal and see where you really could see yourself living. So it gives you that flexibility. There's no sort of high upfront costs. Okay, you don't see any sort of growth or on your equity, and rents can increase, but it provides you that flexibility to be able to decide on where you see yourself living. I've had conversations with one or two individuals where they've committed to a property purchase before spending time there, and then after a year or two realizing that maybe that's not the location for them, and there are potentially high taxes on property purchases. So if you sell after 1 or 2 years and then rebuy, um, it can have a negative effect on your finances due to potential taxes. So I would recommend renting somewhere for the first 12 months, doing scouting missions, get a feel of the area of Portugal, different locations, and then make a decision on where you'd like to go. Second is, do you need an accountant? In essence, yes. When you have complex cross-border dealings and potential income from maybe pensions or investments elsewhere, the Modelo Free, which is due June 30th each year, and the tax year runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, it can get quite complex, especially for foreign income. Accountants, depending on who you use, we have preferred partners here, and partnerships with accountants that we can introduce to. They will be able to submit and deal with this for you, because any sort of potential inaccuracies or something can cause major headaches around the tax side of things. Third, currency exchange. I've seen this a lot. A lot of people, surprisingly, still use high street banks to make currency conversions. And with these, there are hidden, potentially in some cases, hidden fees, poor exchange rates. And just by using a currency exchange company, a regulated one like Smart Currency, you can get so much more for your capital, and they can talk you through strategies, especially on larger property purchases or larger transfers. They can get a much better rate for you, massively reduce costs, and also they've got sort of forward contracts and other type of strategies that can limit the downside, because I'm sure if there's any Americans listening here on now or on repeat, there's been a considerable loss or downturn in the dollar to the euros this year. We're over 10%, which is a big difference. So saving potentially in these currency exchanges will benefit you also. And then fourth and finally, how important is a financial advisor? I'm going to be very biased here. And a financial advisor is very important. As I've mentioned, it can save considerable amounts on tax with timing, planning, potential restructuring for life in Portugal. Think you're in a whole new tax environment, completely different to what you've been used to. Assets, investments, savings, jurisdictions, all of these may have been suited previously, but once you're in Portugal, they may not be. So working with a financial advisor like myself, we can help with pension planning, um, investment tax efficiency, potential restructuring of assets, may save yourself thousands in tax. Estate planning, Portugal has forced heirship laws, meaning if not sort of structured correctly or potential or correct wills put into place, it can get difficult with passing on your estate to your chosen beneficiaries. And then once again, most people, if you're coming from the UK, US, or elsewhere, you may have alternative currencies. You're going to be in a whole new currency outgoing stage, such as being in euros. So, yeah, that planning around limiting your currency risk, we can help with. So, all of these aspects all come into financial planning. And this is what I can do on any sort of meetings or for anyone that reaches out to us to see whether or not our services are going to be of any relevance or benefit to your potential situation. All okay, Daniel?
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. Thank you for that, Henry. I think essentially from this point, then, what we'll do is we'll see if there's any questions that have been asked by the live chat right now, and we'll also go and we've got a list of some kind of decided questions as well, which should also give a good kind of overview of
Perfect.
the kind of general queries people have. So I suppose the first one would be just to kick
I
things
do
off.
have, sorry, Daniel, just to jump in, I
That's
do
all right.
have a few more pages just to go through. But if there are any questions that have come up from what we've covered, maybe it's best to just cover them now if possible.
Yeah, of course. So I think one question that we have right now. Um, so we have one from Shona, which says, if I rented my house out for a year in the UK and lived in
Yeah,
Portugal, what would my tax
yeah.
liability in the UK be?
So properties will still be taxed at source UK properties, but it would need to be declared in Portugal. And if, let's say, you're under the threshold for tax in the UK, no tax may be payable, but there could be tax liable and due in that case in Portugal. So because of the double taxation agreement, you'll never be taxed twice, but any tax paid at source will be taken into consideration when declared in Portugal.
I see. Okay, fantastic. And we have one more from Glyn, which says, I have a final salary pension paid by the government. Should I leave it where it is or transfer it? And should I do it while still a UK resident or when I move to Portugal? So a bit of a two-parter.
Good question. If you are taking from your final salary scheme already, then it will be locked in to the scheme as it is. And then I imagine you've probably got a sort of set um, income amount that you're going to receive for life. If not, if you haven't drawn from that pension yet, technically you do have options available to you, but final salary schemes, the majority of them have very good benefits or protected rights to them, where 9 times out of 10, they're best left in the scheme as they are. Because if you make a transfer elsewhere, you're basically giving up your rights to the benefits. So without looking sort of at the pension itself, I can't comment now, but I imagine that it's probably best left as it is, if it's a final salary scheme.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Henry. And
No
again,
worries.
to the people watching, keep those questions coming. We've got a few more slides, but hopefully we'll have a bit more of a back and forth as well after that.
Perfect. Shall I jump on? Shall I go to the
Yes,
next
please
slide?
go ahead. Yeah.
Great. So for non-US clients, there's a highly tax efficient and regularly used structure called the Portuguese Compliance Investment Bond. I know, given the name bond, it doesn't act like your typical bond. It's more of a wrapper from anyone that's from the UK. It's similar, or the most equivalent, close to equivalent of a ISA, stocks and shares ISA, that you can get as being a Portuguese resident. It's not held in Portugal, although it's Portuguese compliant, because we use banks and institutions that are only in highly regulated and secure jurisdictions. So these type of structures are typically held in Ireland or Luxembourg because of that protection and security, but they're opened against your Portuguese tax number and they offer very, very good tax benefits. So in the same way that we have stocks and shares ISAs in the UK, once the money is in that or the investments are held within that wrapper or that ISA, you get very good tax benefits. In the UK, it's completely tax free, but it's reduced here in Portugal. But the actual structure itself doesn't see the returns. It's the investments within there. So it's essentially a wrapper that offers very good tax benefits, as you can see there. The longer you hold that in account or investments open, the less tax you have to pay on only the capital gains, and you can have any global investment within there. So for anyone who has a, let's say, investments, if you restructure this into this type of wrapper or compliant investment, you will receive very good tax benefits, but most of the time you can maintain the investment strategy that you have in your non-compliant investments. And it's a way of just sort of reducing your taxes down. These do depend on suitability to your situation. So if this is something that you are interested in, then it's best to reach out to me and we can sit down and go through whether or not it is suitable to your situation. But the to give you an idea of just sort of a case study of these type of tax savings is, let's say you move to Portugal and you made an investment of €100,000. After 8 years, that investment has grown by 50%. The current valuation would be 150,000. Because you've held that account for longer than 8 years, you get that 60% reduction down from the normal rate of 28% down to 11.2. And then if you wanted to start taking income, because that's the only time tax is payable, it's only on the gain element, and that's withheld by the investment company and paid to the tax authorities on your behalf. So there's no other investments out there, especially that allow international investments, that allow you to save this amount in tax with a Portuguese compliant investment. So highly popular amongst expats because it allows you to hold multi-currencies, global strategies, and very, very good tax benefits. So this is sort of mainly used as the restructure for investments, and yeah, it's a great tax and financial planning strategy and tool. If anyone has any questions on this, I know it's quite complicated, and I didn't want to just throw loads of information at you. But if you have any questions on this, again, reach out or book in using the Calendly link that is there. But for now, I think that's pretty much everything that comes up in sort of individual meetings, the generics on pre and post move. It's difficult to go into sort of more details because I'm trying to keep it quite generalized. But if you do want to run through any sort of questions, feel free to scan the QR code, book a meeting with me, and we can run through your financial situation in a bit more detail and make any sort of talk advice more personalized to your individual situation.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Henry. And just to move on then to a few more questions that we've got. We have Jeff, who has asked, I have a SIPP, but I'm currently a non-resident. Does it make sense to move it to Portugal?
You couldn't necessarily transfer SIPP, a SIP, to Portugal unless there's a scheme available that that you can transfer to, which is very unheard of. So if you're in Portugal now and you have a SIP, if you're under NHR, then you're under. I suppose it depends on the situation. Basically, essentially, no, you wouldn't want to move to Portugal. If there is a reason for you to transfer, that would typically be on if you have restrictions on your SIP, such as the active management or your advisor can no longer work with you, then a transfer may be required. But there's no reason to just transfer to Portugal. That's something we'd have to go into a bit more detail about and why you would do that and the options that have been given to you. But no, typically you wouldn't transfer your SIP um, to Portugal unless you're drawing down on it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Henry. And just now to go to a few of the more kind of like generic questions that may
Yeah,
hopefully give people just a bit more overall information. Um, we know that there has been the end of this non-habitual resident regime, which was as a result of people when they were moving over to Portugal.
yeah.
What are the major changes that have happened since this scheme, the non-habitual resident scheme, has ended?
Yeah, it was quite a big shock. So the Portuguese government decided to put a stop to the NHR as we know it previously, that was more focused on retirees, that gave benefits such as a flat rate of 10% tax from international pensions, no tax on dividends from international sources. And like the question earlier, if you had an international property income, it wouldn't be taxable in Portugal. They put a stop to that because I believe they wanted to switch from promoting benefits to an older demographic, such as retirees, and they restructured to NHR 2.0, it's known as, and this is more focused on younger working professionals who get benefits now. Um, so, yeah, it's been a bit of a shake up. Um, they've switched who the NHR is best suited for and available to. So yeah, it has shaken things up, but there is still regimes available. It just depends on your personal situation as to whether or not you qualify for this new regime that's been introduced.
Okay, brilliant. And I suppose from that point, moving into kind of questions around things being changed and even mistakes that might have been made, what would you say for expats, especially now that this non-habitual residency scheme has ended? What would you say the most common mistakes expats face today when they are moving to Portugal, tax and investment-wise?
Not pre-planning, as I mentioned earlier, not pre-planning, just planning or thinking that they will deal with it once they're in Portugal, but by that time it's too late. So being active and pre-planning before you make the move in the tax year, before you make the move, will give you plenty of time to do anything that's required to save you in tax. So the lack of pre-planning, I would say.
Okay, fantastic. And in terms of that general timeline, then, if someone is looking to move, it should be the previous tax year that they should start having these conversations, making these plans.
Exactly, I'm 100%, because you have exemptions if you make changes in the year that you're still a resident in your home country most of the time. Where if it's delayed until the year that you're going to be a tax resident in Portugal, you're going to potentially be liable to Portuguese taxation. So, yeah, I would say, even speaking with myself, between 3 and 6 months before making the move or before the end of the year, speak with me. We can run through your situation and see whether or not anything is required to benefit you or save you in tax beforehand.
Fantastic. And we have a question from the audience again. So Russell has asked, would it make more sense to use the investment bonds idea than a GIA, even if you want to draw down regularly?
The GIA, depending on where the GIA is based, if the GIA is Jersey based, Jersey falls under a blacklist country, so you're going to be taxed at 35%. If the general investment account GIA is based in the UK, it won't be subject to that, but you're going to be paying 28% tax. Where if you restructure into the Portuguese compliant bond, for the first 5 years, the tax will be the same. But after that, you start seeing the reduction down. Depends on the strategy, the situation. It's very nuanced and needs to be sort of personalized to that individual. But it depends if it's suited and you plan to hold that investment and it's going to provide an income for you for 10, 15, 20 years as a Portuguese resident, then most likely beneficial for that reason. And also the active management. If you're receiving advice on that GIA and you're making changes, every time a buy and sell happens, that can trigger a taxable event in Portugal. So yeah, it's GIAs are not usually best suited for life in Portugal, but it depends on the situation and your circumstances. I'm not sure if that's just me, but I've lost your sound.
Oh, no, that was actually just me. I'd muted myself to make
Ah.
sure there wasn't any background noise. Let me try that again. Thank you for that. Moving back to the more general questions. Um, for the people that are considering moving after they've retired,
Yeah.
what should retirees consider when moving pensions to Portugal? And are there better options than simply drawing down from abroad?
Typically, as I mentioned, you wouldn't transfer your pension to Portugal. You may draw from it and take from it and then transfer the money into Portugal, but you wouldn't transfer one scheme to another from the UK or elsewhere into Portugal. The only time a potential transfer would take place is if you're in a non-expat friendly structure, like a potential private pension that puts restrictions on your pension once you're a non-UK resident. Then a transfer into an international suited option, like an international SIP, could be applicable depending on the pension itself. It's not just do you transfer your pensions. All pensions are different. They, as I mentioned, they have benefits and protected rights attached to the scheme. There's fees associated with a transfer. So it's a case by case basis. But no, pension wouldn't be transferred from one scheme to a Portuguese scheme, maybe income taken and then transferred to Portugal, or a scheme into a more internationally friendly where you can receive ongoing financial advice on the management of the pension to make sure it's performing. Withdrawals are taken easily and there's no restrictions put into place there. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. Thank you. And I've noticed there is now a question from Glyn. Actually matches what I was going to be asking next anyway. And that is in regard to the inheritance tax side of things. Now, what is
Yeah.
the inheritance tax situation in Portugal?
So there is no inheritance tax. They have a type of stamp duty. But if it's going to immediate family, and this is only your Portuguese assets that will be subject to this, if it's going to immediate family, such as children, spouse, parents, um, if that's the case, then it's not subject to inheritance tax. If it's going to outside family members, then there is a type of inheritance tax per se. But if it's going to family members where typically the estate goes to, then it's not subject to inheritance tax. But if it
Okay.
does, if it goes to taxable beneficiaries, let's say like niece and nephew or I don't know, friends,
Mhm.
then Portuguese assets would be taxed at 10% in that case.
Okay, fantastic. And with these inheritance or the lack of inheritance tax for immediate family and the inheritance tax situation with non-immediate family as well, how do these interact with the UK and US systems?
Interesting. So your Portuguese assets will always be subject to Portuguese rules.
Mhm.
UK is now switching from a domiciled inheritance tax basis to a residency inheritance tax basis. So it depends on the assets and where they're located under what rules are applicable. However, if you have assets in multiple countries, so let's say you move to Portugal, you purchase a property here, but you still have your pension, maybe a property back in your home country and savings and investments, then it's best to have a will in each country that you have assets to make sure that there are no complications and simplifies the process because it's a morbid situation. It's not nice for the surviving either partner or beneficiaries. But if there's not even in the most basic form of will in place, it can cause complications, delays, and it adds to the stress and trauma, let's say, of the situation. So yeah, depending on where you have the assets, depends on the rules of that country on inheritance tax. Um, Planning is required in this instance.
And just to confirm, with all that we're talking about, specifically things like this, um, I know that Madeira, there can be some kind of fluctuating rules considering it is a like municipality. Are there any
Yeah,
major changes between Madeira and mainland Portugal?
good question. Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of myself. Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of. There may be some nuanced sort of details, but generally that's the general rule across Portugal.
Ah, fantastic, brilliant. And so following that, then we've kind of spoken a bit about people that are looking to retire, but looking at people which are still more in the workforce at this stage,
Mm,
specifically around people with a digital nomad visa. So,
yeah.
how can remote workers, digital nomads, manage their finances and tax obligations efficiently across borders?
That depends. So the digital nomads, typically the term digital nomads references someone who's going to come and work for 1 or 2 years and then move on and go elsewhere. And that's really been the term, but previously, but I don't think that that's typically the case. So although there's the digital nomad visa, that's usually just for working professionals. So it depends. If you plan on moving your life to Portugal and being in Portugal for the foreseeable, then restructuring is potentially required and makes it more efficient for life in Portugal. However, if you don't plan on making Portugal your home and staying for the foreseeable, typically it doesn't make sense to restructure, but you want to be in something that's expatriate friendly, so internationally friendly for yourself. So it depends on your situation, your goals, um, and what you've got in place at the moment, and then evaluate on what needs to be done.
Okay, fantastic. And I know that in the past, when speaking to people that are looking to move and work overseas, the double taxation, which we did speak about a bit earlier, can be
Yeah,
quite a major concern. Um,
yeah.
are there any other kind of, I suppose you call major points around the double taxation rules that you think might be worth speaking about, or that people have been concerned about in the past?
Um, there's strange rules on the double taxation agreements. There may be this sort of very unique rule for that country and Portugal. So it's always good to understand the basics of the double tax. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, that it's got a double taxation agreement, and two, any sort of unique rules that may be applicable. So it's best to just understand whether or not there is one, and then any potential sort of slip ups that could affect your situation. But like I said, having a tax advisor in Portugal or an accountant um, is imperative, because they will be able to assist and help with these type of things. And even if it's like with myself, having that initial meeting before coming over, just to make sure that um, what you've got, what you'll have, won't cause any potential difficulties down the line.
Brilliant. And I suppose because we've been speaking a lot about Portugal,
Yeah.
it would be good to know and be good for everyone watching to know, how does Portugal's tax treatment compare to these other southern European countries, especially in regards to retirees and investors?
Well, Portugal is one of the highest tax regions in the EU. If you haven't got one of the tax regimes, um, same with Spain. Spain is very similar, but in Portugal, the cost of living is a lot lower. So although tax is potentially higher, um, it's the lifestyle that you move to Portugal for. It's the lower cost of living. Um, so it is higher or high. taxes compared to other places globally, but the cost of living and the lifestyle is a lot less than what you would get elsewhere.
Okay, so it's essentially less about you wanting to move to Portugal because you want to save money on taxes. It's more people should be speaking to you because if they want to move to Portugal, they have to know how to kind of work with the system and make the most out of
Exactly,
it.
exactly, exactly.
Oh, brilliant. And I suppose considering the time, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Oh, yeah.
So moving on to the final kind of few questions. Again, anyone here watching, if you do have any questions, now is the time. But if not, we'll be forwarding over any extra questions to Henry following this meeting or following this webinar. So one question from me then. What would you say is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone that's looking to protect and grow their wealth while in Portugal?
Um, One piece of advice to protect and grow their wealth. Um, Speak with a financial advisor, understand and review your situation, even if it's just a free financial review where we sit down, we look at what's in place at the moment, if there are any alternatives available, or if what you're doing is the best thing for your situation and for taxation. But yeah, I think the most important thing is just to have that conversation and see and find out that what you're doing is the best option for you.
Brilliant. And just to reconfirm then, if anyone did have any questions, if they did want to be sitting down having a conversation with you following this webinar, what is the best way to get a hold of you? What are your kind of general hours? When and how can they book a meeting?
Of course. So there's a few ways. So on the screen, as you can see, you can email me directly at henry.kent@holbornassets.com. I've also got my personal website that I am building my personal brand on and give really good information and examples of type of tax efficient structures for Portugal, how they work, and also for Spain as well. So you can take a look at my personal website. I'm contactable on WhatsApp on my previous Spanish number, and then phone calls on the Portuguese number on there. Or you can scan the QR code and book a meeting with me through Calendly directly into my diary. If that fails, then just feel free to drop me an email. But we also have our free Portugal tax guide that you can request from me that I can send over to you as well. That gives you generic details on how taxation works here in Portugal.
That's perfect. Thank you, Henry. And also quite linked to that, Jeff has asked, do you offer one-off consultations at a set fee?
Yes, so the initial consultation is an introduction meeting. This is to get an understanding of your situation and to find out whether or not our services are going to be of any relevance or benefit. So that introduction meeting is free. It's only at the point that if advice is provided to you and you wanted to proceed with the advice that remuneration is included. So yes, that first meeting is a free conversation. It's more of a discovery meeting to establish whether or not our services are going to be of any relevance or benefit. And like I mentioned earlier, to see whether or not we can assist and if there are any help needed with your situation.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Henry. And I think that is about all the time we have in today's session. Thank you, Henry, for all your insightful tips and advice. We do, to everyone watching, whether on demand or watching live, we do really recommend you get in touch with Holborn directly to discuss your requirements in detail. Before we finish, I'd like to invite you to leave us a review on Trustpilot if you have found this webinar helpful. We also have many upcoming webinars that may be helpful to you, so please do head over to our website to register or click the link below. I will say one more time from us here at Europe's Home, thank you very much, Henry, for joining us today. And to
Thanks, Daniel.
everyone watching, again, live or demand. So thanks again to everyone and all, and happy property hunting. Have a great day.
All the
See you,
best.
Henry. Bye.
Bye bye.